Warning, spoilers ahead for The Rings of Power Episodes 1-2 The Lord of the Rings. The Rings of Power drops plenty of hints teasing Sauron's identity and whereabouts, but will any of them come to pass? Amazon's The Rings of Power TV series begins midway through J.R.R. Tolkien's Second Age. The great villain Morgoth has long been defeated, and although scores of orcs remain unaccounted for alongside Chief Lieutenant Sauron, Middle-earth has been peaceful for so long that most believe any lingering evil died out of its own accord. Future generations will come to rue that complacency, as Sauron soon embarks on a reign of terror that lasts for thousands of years. The Rings of Power is being clever about Sauron's status. Galadriel spent centuries hunting the Dark Lord without success, but as J.R.R. Tolkien wrote, Second Age Sauron could alter his appearance and take a fair form when manipulating enemies. As The Rings of Power begins, therefore, Sauron could be anywhere and anyone. Pre-release theories earmarked two main suspects, the Meteor Man who falls from the sky, and Charlie Vickers Halbrand. The Rings of Power Episodes 1-2 drop clues that support and damage both cases, while also keeping the mystery burning bright by casting suspicion elsewhere. Here's every Sauron identity hint in The Rings of Power's opening 2 chapters. Meteor Man falls when Galadriel turns back, beginning with the Stranger, played by Daniel Wayman and more commonly known as Meteor Man. The Rings of Power Episodes 1-2 clearly want audiences to suspect this fallen vagabond is a source of great evil. The first big clue is how the timing of his arrival in Middle-earth coincides with Galadriel's decision to stay. The dying moments of The Rings of Power Episode 1 air a frenetic back and forth between Meteor Man screaming through the sky and Galadriel choosing her pursuit of Sauron over the endless peace of Valinor. The Rings of Power's editing implies these two events are somehow linked, and such a possibility cannot be discounted. Is it truly a coincidence that Galadriel's resolve to defeat Sauron hits her at the exact moment a magical stranger enters Middle-earth? The way both scenes are intertwined almost suggests Morpeth Clark's Galadriel has subconsciously felt a dark force resurfacing, and knows her presence is needed. Meteor Man's arrival, the falling leaf, more concerning than Meteor Man making his The Rings of Power entrance at the same time Galadriel refuses an invitation into Valinor is the weird leaf Gil-galad finds in Lindon. The Elves' High King watches a strange flaming projectile career across the sky, and in that very same moment, a large leaf falls in his kingdom of Lindon. Flipping over leaf reveals its autumnal beauty has been infected by a black poison, the kind of affliction Sauron and Morgoth wrought upon Middle-earth's flora in the past. Similar to Galadriel's change of heart, the timing of this leaf falling in The Rings of Power cannot be a coincidence. Nori holds the hand of flame unquenched. When Galadriel is searching for Sauron in Forodwaith, she describes his hand as flame unquenched. This line may foreshadow Nori Brandyfoot meeting Meteor Man for the first time. When the fallen nudist reaches out and grabs her, flames swirl around them, enter the stranger's body, then are expelled back onto the forest floor. We also know this isn't ordinary fire, since Nori is unburned by its touch. The Rings of Power's fire theme could subtly promise a Meteor Man-Sauron connection. Meteor Man lands in a flaming eye in accord with the above. The Rings of Power Episode 2 includes an aerial shot of Meteor Man's crater, and the circle of scorched earth strongly resembles a flaming eye with the stranger at its pupil. Even if the resemblance to Sauron's famous eye from Peter Jackson's movie trilogy is unintentional, The Rings of Power surely knows what implications would come from putting a character audiences will obviously suspect to be Sauron in the middle of a fiery ring. Meteor Man is using dark magic that the Rings of Powers. Meteor Man is a magical being isn't automatically suspicious. Spells can be cast by good and evil alike in The Lord of the Rings, and even wholesome types such as Gandalf and Galadriel have occasionally intimidated lesser beings with their foreboding power. Meteor Man, however, is already treading much darker territory. The stranger snaps a twig while struggling to communicate with Nori, which somehow results in her father, Largo, snapping his ankle back at the Harfoot camp. And after Meteor Man uses fireflies to draw a star chart, all the creatures he enchanted suddenly die. Gandalf and Galadriel might be enjoyed the odd scary moment, but hurting living creatures is the stuff of dark magic. Nori's new friend isn't committing these atrocities deliberately, but they demonstrate an inner darkness and disregard for light that goes hand in hand with Sauron. Is Meteor Man too comedic to be Sauron? While the Rings of Powers opening chapters drop many a hint to imply Meteor Man and the Dark Lord Sauron are one and the same, Episode 2's comedy leans away from that conclusion. The Lord of the Rings may enjoy its light-hearted and goofy moments, but Sauron is always presented as a deadly serious threat. Nori and Poppy pushing Meteor Man in a cart they later lose control of doesn't exactly honor that spirit. Would the Rings of Power really depict Sauron rolling down a hill in a tiny wheelbarrow, legs flailing as he goes? The comic, whimsical tone of Meteor Man's The Rings of Power story could prove that whoever the stranger from the skies may be, he's not the Dark Lord. Halbrand drops an ominous warning. Meteor Man isn't the only potential Sauron candidate in the Rings of Power. Many viewers smell something fishy about Halbrand beyond just his soggy clothes. Galadriel encounters Halbrand among a raft of shipwrecked refugees on the Sundering Seas, and mystery is immediately cast over his backstory and intentions. Halbrand claims to hail from a human settlement overrun by orcs, but his natural caginess gives reason to doubt that story. Even before Halbrand spoke a word, fans touted him as a possible Sauron alter ego, but when Charlie Vickers' character finally does open his mouth, the plot thickens. Speaking about Galadriel, Halbrand utters, "Looks can be deceiving" as one of his first lines. The Rings of Power could be foreshadowing a future twist where Halbrand himself is the deceiver, and his visage is actually the fair human guise of Sauron, who is targeting Galadriel as a precursor to infiltrating the elves. Halbrand survives the worm. Isn't it weird that only Galadriel and Halbrand survive the WYRM? This denizen of the Sundering Seas assails Halbrand's ship, then hunts down the survivors' raft to finish the job. Why would it then disappear into the horizon when two tasty snacks are still for the taking? Halbrand may detach his raft from the main float while Galadriel swims away as quickly as possible, but they're still easy prey. Could the duo's unlikely survival prove unseen forces are at work here? If Halbrand were secretly Sauron, he might be magically attracted the WYRM to kill off unwanted companions, then dismissed the creature when only himself and his intended target remained. Halbrand rescuing Galadriel could disprove a Sauron connection as a general storytelling rule. Characters hiding their true identity from the audience are rarely shown alone, since most tricksters revert to their true selves when no one is watching. The Rings of Power's Meteor Man gets around this conundrum with amnesia, but if Halbrand is secretly Sauron, then the Dark Lord is fully conscious behind that handsome exterior, and you'd expect him to act differently alone than around Galadriel. When the elf is thrown into the water, however, Halbrand looks startled and shocked. He considers what course of action to take then, against his better judgment, rescues the drowning woman. Halbrand reacts precisely how a mortal man would react in this situation, not like a villain who just lost his prey. Theo stumbled across the sword hilt by accident. Sauron isn't necessarily masquerading as another character in the Rings of Power. Episodes 1-2 establish Sauron's sigil as a major ongoing mystery, with even the combined knowledge of Galadriel, Elrond and Gil-galad unable to discern the mark's meaning. Several clues point towards Sauron's sigil bearing some relevance to his return, that his spirit is somehow embedded into this mark, thereby allowing him to elude Galadriel for so many centuries, and that activating the sigil will herald his grand comeback. The Rings of Power's Theo storyline teases this outcome further, since the youngster claims he found the magical hilt by accident when a floorboard moved. This sounds suspiciously like the One Ring drawing Sméagol and Bilbo Baggins toward it during the Third Age. Theo gets angrier after finding the sword hilt. After stealing the sword hilt, Theo seemingly becomes angrier, snapping at his friend for almost touching the blade, then later taking his frustrations out on a floorboard. Again, this echoes symptoms caused by the One Ring, meaning Sauron could have used a similar spell on the sigil, temporarily binding his spirit to this rune. The mark just needs an unsuspecting victim to unleash its hidden secret. Could Waldreg be Sauron in the Rings of Power? In The Lord of the Rings, the good guys use Aragorn's army to draw Sauron's attention away the true threat of Frodo and Sam. Is the Rings of Power using Meteor Man and Halbrand to draw attention away from the real undercover Sauron? Waldreg, the innkeeper of Terharet, is perfectly magnanimous, friendly toward elf and human alike. His character also receives the honor of uttering Sauron's name first in the Rings of Power's marketing material. And although the Rings of Power Episode 1 doesn't specify whose barn Theo steals the sword hilt from, dialogue implies it could be that salty rascal Waldreg. A man who's a friend to everyone but hides a dark blade in secret would certainly be in the frame as a disguised Sauron, and for those in need of further convincing, the Southlands appears to be situated where Mordor will soon sit. It makes sense that Sauron would hide in the province he intends to make his permanent home. The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power continues Thursday, Friday on Prime Video. Join Amazon Prime. Watch thousands of movies, TV shows anytime. Start free trial now.
My heart returns to you, dinner, you